Mr. Topher Field! Mr. Topher Field!
Joining me now is that inspiring and brave Australian documentary filmmaker, Topher Field.
Melbourne, my home. What unfolded here shocked the world and caused many to wonder what happened to Australia. In the middle of it all were ordinary people, people like us. My name is Topher Field. I'm the director of Battleground Melbourne.
Topher is on a mission to empower people.
The only thing that limits government power is the limit of our obedience.
But we realized a deeper truth, that good people break bad laws.
Moral cowardice is the great scourge of our time.
We're here to take back the freedoms that were earned for us by the people that we built this shrine to remember.
This was a military checkpoint. They had the army on these checkpoints. And without irony, saying, papers, please. Our boys in blue wouldn't obey a government tyranny. Excuse me, they will.
Yes.
I understood that my arrest was coming, and I by then I was on the verge of a breakdown.
Hi everyone, Rukshan here, and quick video to alert you to the arrest of Topher Field.
The problem with Australians is not that so many of them are descended from convicts, but that so many are descended from prison officers.
I went as far on one occasion as to saying, yeah, you're absolutely right, I'm inciting. I'm inciting people to exercise their human rights.
And I will accept nothing less than freedom. Freedom for me, freedom for my children, and freedom for us all.
Well, hello and good evening. It is a surprise slow chat, a surprise podcast. I'm Topher Field. My guest tonight is going to be Jack McGuire from the Red Union. Unfortunately, due to a bit of a mix-up in the back end, I haven't actually had the opportunity to promote tonight's podcast. So if you're wondering why you didn't see an email, if you're wondering why you didn't see a post earlier today, that's going to be why. But thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us. We're going to have a great chat tonight. If you don't know what Red Union are doing, trust me, you're going to want to stick around. And Red Union have actually been really, really cool. This is the first time this has ever happened on the show. Red Union have actually said that anyone that signs up during the show tonight and becomes a union member, and we'll talk about why that is, and you're actually going to save money, by the way. Red Union are more cost effective than whatever union you've got at the moment. Then you're going to save a bunch of money. There's a discount code. You're going to save a bunch of money on that. But before we talk about that, let's talk to Jack McGuire from the Red Union itself to actually find out why you would want to join. What is it that they do that is genuinely so much better than any of the other unions? And also the bit that I'm actually really looking forward to is talking about the model that they're pioneering of creating real alternatives, freedom-loving, high values alternatives to the current status quo that actually save people money and actually give people better service. It's not a matter of, I'll support this freedom movement thing, even though it'll cost you more, or even though it's not as good or anything like that. It's genuinely do yourself a favor, save yourself some money, get better service, and here's a real, genuine, viable alternative to the status quo, which is funding political parties and all kinds of other nonsense, the existing union movement. Okay, anyway, enough on that, because we're going to talk all about that with Jack very, very soon. I have to do something at the start of every single podcast these days. Otherwise, my wife gets very annoyed at me. And that is, I need to tell you about my books and my courses and things like that. My wife has this weird thing where she likes to be able to pay the bills. I know, strange, crazy, right? And she likes to be able to have a bit of money come in every once in a while. And so I had to make a promise to her that I was going to do more to promote my stuff. So Good People Break Bad Laws is the website. Now, we've got a couple of comments have come in. Daniel Harris, g'day, Daniel. And Dawn Browning says hi as well. Hello to you as well. I'll just put in the URL here. Now, goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. All right, that's where you're going to find my book. That's where you're going to find my course. That's where you're going to find all the different stuff that I'm up to. Now, also, by the way, if you are in Sydney, I will be in Sydney this weekend. You want to come to the rally opposing the misinformation, disinformation bill. It's going to be at Speaker's Corner. at 11:30 a.m. on Saturday. I'll be there. Craig Kelly will be there. A bunch of amazing people will be there. That's being put on by the Libertarian Party. So if you want to say hi, make sure you come and say hi to me while you're there. And then also, David Anthony, nice to see you. Dan's saying, speaking of better service, your internet connection is not great. I noticed this, but when I do a speed test, I'm getting really good results. So something really, really weird is going on. Tell you what, I'm going to take a huge risk here. I'm going to switch to... Oh, no, I'm not, because it's not available. There you go. I was about to switch to a different Wi-Fi network, and that's not available to me. There it is. Okay. No, that's going to be even worse. That's got a terrible signal. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with my internet connection. It's showing that it should be fine. I do apologize. Anyway, where was I? goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. You'll find my book, Good People Break Bad Laws. You can also pre-order my upcoming book, which you will have in time for Christmas, Good Christians Break Bad Laws. That's on the theology of civil disobedience. And yes, I'm going to talk about Romans chapter 13. Yes, I'm going to talk about 1 Peter chapter 2. Yes, I'm going to talk about Jesus saying, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. All that and so much more gets covered in there, because I believe that a proper and thorough reading and understanding of the Bible will lead you to the conclusion that Christians should, in fact, be disobeying the government whenever the government oversteps the God-given boundaries of governmental authority. So if that interests you, go and pre-order Good Christians Break Bad Laws. You'll find that at that same website, Good People Break Bad Laws. You'll also find my course. Now, actually, what I should do here, give me a moment, indulge me for a second. I need to do a share screen. This one here. Let's just share that. Da-da-da-da-da. Is that working? Ta-da! There it is. Okay, and let me just get rid of this. You'd think I would know what I'm doing by now, but I still don't. Okay, so this is the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. This is something that I put on. It is 6 weeks. It was very, very well received. We've got when it loads, there we go. We've got Bridget saying just brilliant information and super important realizations. We have Susie saying, I've already felt a shift. I'm enjoying the practical points and ideas. We've got Gloria saying, I'm so grateful. It's come at a good time in my life. Greg saying the session on courage really resonated for me. So this is something that I did to download a bunch of stuff that's in my head. These are the topics that I talk about when I speak in person to groups. So I talk about focus, I talk about hope, I talk about courage, I talk about faith, and I talk about community. And I brought those 5 into a single 6-session course. The 6th session is about next steps. It's really, really practical and making sure that we actually put meat on the bones and we can put rubber on the road. So if that interests you, go to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com, find the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. It is all online. It is available right now. You can buy it and binge watch it all 6 sessions. That's one of the things that I've done in order to try and make a bit of money, pay the bills a little bit. But don't worry, I will continue to do my podcast for free, as always, putting up all of my political commentary online. I am having a fat fingers day. I am just absolutely mashing all the wrong buttons right now. All right. So go to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com, find the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass and watch that. That's something that I've done in order to help me pay bills. But don't worry, I will still be offering, obviously, the podcasts are absolutely free. All of my political commentary on all my social media pages are absolutely free. My political commentary and my investigative journalism videos that I release, usually only a few videos a year, but I'm still doing that work, and that will, of course, be free. And if you haven't seen it, you can still watch, and you will always be able to watch online for free the documentary Battleground Melbourne. Go to battlegroundmelbourne.com to be able to do that. But if you'd like to support me, buy a book, buy a course. You'll make my wife very, very happy. Thank you very much. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about the Red Union. A lot of people don't necessarily know about the Red Union, even though they've been doing some fantastic work. They've been around for quite a while now. They have well over 20,000 members. They are covering a number of different industries, and they have really done some remarkable things for their members, especially over the last 4 years. But they didn't pop up in the last 4 years. They've actually been around for a lot longer than that. But I had the privilege of working with them and making a video for them to help people to understand what it is that they do and who they are. So we're going to talk to Jack McGuire very, very soon. But first, I'm actually going to play a video. This is the video that I worked with them on, that we did together. Let me just, yep, there we go. So James, thank you very much for your review of the course there. Highly recommend the masterclass. And very much appreciate the feedback. What's it called? The review. There we go. Highly recommend the Masterclass. Let's watch the Red Union video that I did for Red Union. I directed it. I'm not in it, but you will in this video meet Jack McGuire. He's our guest tonight. Let's watch this video and then we'll bring Jack on.
They were a real beacon of hope in those times when we were not working.
Their values and ethics aligned with my own, and the fact that they really are willing to bat for the workers.
You feel like you've got someone fighting on the side of right.
I mean, I had been previously a member of the AMA, but I found on a number of occasions when I really needed them, they really weren't there for me.
As a single mum, I was facing losing my home, so the Red Union really saved my life.
We want to save Western civilization and defend the individual. And I really fundamentally believe in giving individuals choice and allowing them to choose what best services them, what their values align with.
And they were workplace protection without the politics, and that aligned with what I wanted, and I joined them basically as soon as I saw them.
It's upholding things that people like the AMA should have upheld, like, Hippocratic Oath, human rights.
I think Western civilization, if you look at its fundamental building blocks, the education system, I think it's largely been corrupted. And if you look at the health system, it's on the brink of collapse. Thousands of nurses have been sacked around the country. Inflation is running rampant, testing our economic system. I mean, all of these things that sort of build up Western society are under pressure.
And it can have a very, very detrimental effect on you mentally if you do not have strong support networks around you. And that's why I gravitated immediately towards Red.
During the pandemic, a lot of staff were stood down, and Red Union was really the only union at the time that was willing to support us.
We've got quite a number of nurses here, and they had the same experience with QNU, where they got no assistance whatsoever despite their concerns, so they switched to Red Union.
They know that we align with their values and that we will stand beside them when nobody else will.
We defend the individual. That sets us apart quite drastically, philosophically, from the other unions who believe in the collective above all else.
And I think they're not greedy. I think that because they don't have all of the bureaucracy that's involved with all of the other unions, I think that definitely makes it easier for them to keep their prices down.
The money that the members pay is used for them and the things that matter for them. We don't give any money to any political parties.
But we're actually much more cost effective, somewhere in the order of about $300 or $400 a year with most unions. People can save and put in their pocket with cost of living, every dollar helps.
It's all about ensuring that their money is used for them, for the things that matter to them.
The reason we're able to provide it for such a cheaper rate is because we're not financially propping up political parties.
I'm part of Red Union and the nurses and the doctors because of what we're fighting for.
Because the greater numbers that we have, the more power that we have and the more influence we have.
The smallest thing you can do is join AMPS to help support them take action on your behalf.
Well, there's definitely change afoot, and change doesn't happen without people expressing what they think, what they feel, and that's what you need to do.
I don't regret switching at all. It was the best thing I did.
Our members are extraordinarily happy with us, and we're very proud of our relationship with our members.
Are you getting the service that you want from the union you have? Do they align with the values that you have and that you want for your profession? Because if they don't, then you actually need to do something. Red Union were prepared to risk everything to stand up on behalf of their members and on behalf of the values that are foundational to our culture. And I want to stand with them and fight for those for the future of my kids.
Well, there you have it. I do appreciate Tech49 letting me know the stream quality had an issue. The audio apparently was okay, but the video was crap. What's funny is that about a minute ago, all of a sudden, the warning telling me that my internet connection was crap disappeared. And as Carter has simply since said, that's better. So I have no idea what was wrong. I have genuinely no idea why it's come good. I hope it has. I hope that everyone can see me better the way that Az is saying that Az can. So fingers crossed, whatever that tech issue was has just resolved itself and we're on for a good podcast, because we get to the important bit now, and that is to bring on Jack McGuire, the director of Red Union. Jack, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Topher. And I must say, mate, you're a real talent when it comes to putting together videos. It's appreciated.
Well, look, thank you. And I appreciated having you guys as a client, because it's not often that I get to work with people where it really is more than just a video. It's actually like you guys are on a mission. It's a mission that I align with, and you're a pleasure to work with, and it's a pleasure to kind of align myself with you guys. So it's actually, let me start with a couple of comments here, because one of the things that is really notable about the Red Union is anytime I talk to one of your members, and I was actually talking to one of your members just earlier today in person, they love you. They absolutely love you. And Simone has said Red Union were the only ones who supported the nurses when mandated. They exploded and now cover so many, so the different industries and so forth. Support and promote them always. Nick McGills, I'm not quite sure exactly what this comment is getting to. I think I understand it in the end. It says, hope they're of use. Tried getting them. I think the them here is the TWU, which is not a Red Union, to help me when the mandates were on, and my 22-year membership with TWU was no help. I can tell you, Nick, that Red Union have been a tremendous help to a lot of people when mandated. And yeah, look, what's not the sales pitch? What's the overview? What is Red Union? Because there's kind of this Red Union thing over the top, and then there's all the other individual unions that service different industries and different locations. Help us to figure out what's what.
So the Red Union Support Hub, where I'm sitting now, we centralise the service provision to try and reduce the cost barrier for workers to set up an alternative union, because as you can imagine, quite a lot of cost involved with legal teams, websites, etc. But we do think it's better that there be alternative voices and people to be able to vote with their feet and still get protection, but also to leave that policy decision-making power in the hands of the profession and closer to those that it affects.
So, because a union is a lot more than just a body that's kind of there, a box that you tick. I've only ever been in relatively blue-collar lines of work where union membership wasn't mandatory, but it was culturally expected. But also, we didn't have things like professional indemnity insurance and other things like that are a consideration for people like nurses and so forth. So you guys have legal teams. If someone gets into legal trouble or a dispute with an employer, you can come into bat for them. You went into bat for so many people with regard to the mandates. You do tick the box for professional indemnity insurance with your memberships, etc. Talk to me a little bit about sort of all that stuff and the other stuff that kind of comes with being a Red Union member.
Yes, well, as a nurse, doctor, etc., you need professional indemnity insurance to maintain your registration. We provide that. We help people negotiate enterprise agreements, which I think now more than ever, although we've got a better plan than enterprise agreements, now more than ever, it's critically important that we try and address household purchasing power is going backwards. I mean, I think people are struggling more than they have in decades. And I think that's largely because of weak politicians and driving inflation, and it's the hidden tax that we're all hurting under. We pride ourselves on being able to answer the phones, which I think is critically important. When someone needs help, they've been disciplined, they're at work, they medication error, whatever it is, they're under the pump, they need someone to talk to. We answer most of our calls within 3 rings. We return all of our calls same business day if we can't. And if you compare that to some of the other unions, we found out, I think one of them, one of the Victorian unions in your home state has turned off their phone systems, and it says, please just send us an email as a voice recorder, and they hope to get back to you within a couple of weeks. Now, within a couple of weeks, your matter may well have resolved in the negative or the positive, and you don't need them anymore. So because again, we've got offices in Perth, now New Zealand, we can answer the phone basically 12 hours a day, and we're trying to expand that even further. So we've got a ferocious, drive to try and just provide an incredible union service for our members. We're actually only a couple of weeks away from setting up and heard it here first, an accounting firm, Red Tax, to be able to provide below market rate tax returns for nurses, just as
nice.
Want to be a one-stop shop for employment needs that is, provides a really good service, but hopefully can save people money.
Yeah, it's an incredibly cool concept. It's weird to think, and I don't know why I had this idea, but for me, at first, the idea of an alternative union was kind of, I don't know why. I'm a free market guy. I believe in free markets. I love free markets. But the idea of a free market in unions just felt like a bit of a contradiction in terms almost. I mean, unions are kind of, they're kind of these monolithic bodies that dominate industries. Here's a great review from Hannah. So it was such a relief to speak to someone at Red when I felt like, I was in dire straits. Thank you. So yeah, like I said, your members absolutely love you. Whose idea was it to go, hey, we're going to take on the unions?
A group of nurses on the Sunshine Coast. This was back about 10 years ago. They were not happy with the Queensland Nurses Union during the Queensland Health payroll bungle, which you may remember or may not. Many nurses were double paid, not paid at all for a couple of months, given twice the amount of annual leave, directed, go take your annual leave, came back and said, oh, you shouldn't have done that, now you owe us money. A complete mess. And these nurses on the Sunshine Coast were angry with their union because the union was still directly affiliated with the Labor Party. And their worry was they were too concerned about not embarrassing their mates in Parliament as opposed to trying to resolve the issue quickly and help their members. So they approached Graham Haycroft, the founder of the Red Union Support Hub, and he helped them underwrite the extraordinary cost, as I've mentioned, of trying to get a service together to be able to then provide a union-style service to the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland, which was, as I said, started by a group of nurses in the Sunshine Coast 10 years ago.
And it's kind of grown since then. You've now got nurses representation in, I think, most states in Australia. Teachers, I think, are the same. You mentioned New Zealand a second ago. What have you got over there?
Nurses, doctors, and teachers. And we set up about about 12 months ago. Now a group of nurses and midwives. Unfortunately, we couldn't place insurance for them. And doctors and teachers were pretty upset with the level of advocacy or total lack thereof. During the last 4 years, etc., and they were just looking to vote with their feet, and there was nothing there. So we helped them set up some unions over there. And interesting, your point about free market in the union space. Australia is the only Western country where they try their darndest to not allow workers the choice or workers the right to set up their own union, separate to any other union. In New Zealand, when we started, it was very easy for us to help these nurses and doctors and teachers set up a registered union in competition to the other unions. And in fact, we were the third registered union for nurses. In Canada, it's the same. In the United States, it's the same. In the United Kingdom, there is competitive unionism, so to speak. There was a gentleman from Western Australia, Mark Olson, who wrote a number of articles in the Australian about this, and he was the Western Australian secretary of the Nurses Union. And he said, we need more competition in the union space because guess what? If you don't have competition, prices go up and service goes down. So the Western Australian Nurses Union is the standing embarrassment to the union movement across the country because they're able to offer union fees that are actually cheaper than us. The Nurses Union in Western Australia at $400 a year. So and they have economies of scale. I suspect once we get to their scale, we'll probably be able to do it cheaper than them because I think we could do it better than them. But it just goes to show the huge amounts of money that these unions, almost 4, 5, maybe even 600, depending on how cheaply they're doing their service, dollars per year per union member is going where? One can only imagine. We had a gentleman join us who used to be on these. He's our treasurer actually of the Teachers Union. He was on the state council of the Queensland Teachers Union, and he said during election campaigns they would just book out big halls and have rooms filled with paid staff phone canvassing into marginal electorates, saying, you need to vote for the Labor Party, if you want this built or whatever. So that's where the money goes. It doesn't necessarily get handed over as a check to the Labor Party, but it certainly goes to campaigners who just bloated staff, and all they do is focus on politics, not their members.
Well, it's we've seen the red shirts wrought in Victoria. That's related to all of this. This is where really unions were spending money and involving their members in what were really campaign activities. And there was a lot of fallout from that. I'll watch what I say because I don't want to get myself into legal trouble. But we have a good question here from one of our YouTube viewers. Do you feel like representing some workers in Vic, the AWU have abandoned us? You are set up in Vic, and I believe you do now have a more sort of general workers union. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that video was actually shot in our Victorian office, and we have so we cover Nurses Professional Association, Teachers Professional Association, the Sworn Officers Professional Association for Police, the Australian Medical Professionals Society for Doctors, and then we have the Independent Workers Union of Australia, which I suppose would be an alternative, I guess, to the AWU. And I think our secretary of the AWU, Sarah Toohey, lives in Victoria herself. So,
yeah. Sorry, I'm stuffing up the screen there. I'm just on your website here, and there's all the various nurses professional associations you mentioned there: Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, West Australia, South Australia. You've also got the same in the teachers professional associations. And then tell me a bit more, because we haven't really mentioned these. You've got your SOPA, which is the Sworn Officers Professional Association of Australia. You've got your AMPS, which is the Australian Medical Professional Society for Doctors. Then, probably more relevant to this question from our viewer here, the IWUA, Independent Workers Union of Australia. So they are all nationwide unions. They're not applicable to any one particular state?
Yeah, that's right. If you're state employed or federally employed police officer or doctor or worker, all of those are applicable to you, and you can join those. So I guess the IWA is kind of like a one of the old MISOs union, as you'd say.
So yeah, sort of the miscellaneous unions. I'm developing a theory that my weird internet connectivity issue may be related to when I share a screen. If my internet comes good in the next minute or so, having stopped sharing a screen, then that will be confirmation. We'll see. I might be wrong. Daniel is asking the question, thoughts on decentralized unions. I'm not sure, Daniel, what you would mean with a decentralized union versus versus just competition within unions. So if you could just sort of clarify your question there, is exactly what you're asking. So my experience with unions, I've had experience with two over the years. One was the Media and Entertainment Arts Alliance, because I was studying acting and dabbling in some acting and so forth, and they're kind of the union for actors and for media personalities and so forth. And what I didn't appreciate about them was the sense of a closed shop. You understood, it was never said, but you understood that if you didn't have a member number on your audition application when you wanted to audition for a role, that you weren't going to get an audition. That was just an unspoken sort of rule within the industry, and it was just understood. If you don't know, you don't have to be a member, but if you don't write every single audition application had a spot to write your member number. Why do they need that on an audition application? It's not relevant information. Well, it's relevant if they're going to throw all the ones that don't have a number in the bin, which is my understanding of what was happening. So I felt bullied and coerced into having to be a member of a union that I didn't see any real value in, to be honest. But then the other time I had a lot of exposure to unions, I spent 7 years working as a forklift driver, picker, packer, truck loader in a refrigerated warehouse. So just very blue collar work, providing all of the fruit and veg to Coles in Victoria, the southern part of Western Australia, parts of South Australia, and all of Tasmania, all came through our warehouse in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And the union there was very, very fired up, very, very loud, and they wanted you to believe that without them, we would all be being completely screwed over. The problem was that we were being paid there something like 50% higher than the award rate. And across the road from us was another facility where people were being paid only the award rate for the exact same work, refrigerated, perishable logistics. They did the exact same work. They were being paid the award. We were being paid 50% above the award. The thing was, the union was the same union in both locations. And so the union reps would come to us in our location where we're getting paid 50% above award and say, oh, you better support the union because otherwise you'll end up on a bad wicket like those blokes across the road. And I'd say, well, hang on, but they've got the same union. The difference between them and us isn't the union, it's the boss. We've got a boss that actually cares about looking after his people and recognizes that if people want to come to work, it's going to make him more money in the long run. He's going to have less trouble in the long run. But I started to get worried because they were militant, and every 3 years, we would renegotiate the EBA, and they were demanding 5% plus wage increases every single year, and they were getting them. And I said to them, guys, we're already so far above market rate that sooner or later we are going to become too expensive. We're just going to become like, it's just not going to be viable for Coles to keep using us as their logistics provider. And I remember having it out with one of the union reps. I said, listen, that's not going to hurt me. When this place loses its contract with Coles, it shuts down. That's it. That's the end of this business. And we all lose our jobs. And that's not actually bad for me because I'm a young guy in good health with a good future prospects, and I'll get a job somewhere else, no problem. But for the old guys, for the guys in their 50s, the guys in their 60s, never really learned how to use computers early in life, and they've gotten by on a forklift driving job now. But if they had to go and get a new job, a new forklift driving job somewhere, they're screwed. They're completely screwed. And the union is what's going to screw them. Sure enough, they didn't listen to me. They didn't listen to any of the other guys that were also saying the same thing in the same workplace. It took a few years, but finally, after I'd been there for about 7 years, Coles did not renew the contract. They handed it over to another company that was paying their people award rates rather than us at 50% above award. And everyone lost their jobs, and all those old guys out of their jobs. And in the end, in my opinion, the union was so militant that it actually screwed over its own members.
Well, it's interesting on bargaining. The unions make a big deal out of it, bluff and bluster, and we're going to get all these big pay rises. We actually did some numbers. We put a whole lot of these enterprise agreements that the nurses union in Queensland here have done through AI, and we were able to work out that over the last 20 years, the union has been able to organise pay rises that has outstripped inflation by 1%. And that 1% covers your union dues almost to the dollar.
Yeah. No, it seems to me that unions today are more about political power and union reps working their way in to the Labor Party. So in the Liberal Party, the pathway to becoming a Liberal Party candidate is to join the Young Liberal Party while you're at university, preferably studying law, go on to be a staffer in an MP's office and suck up for long enough that eventually you get a cushy endorsement in a cushy, safe Liberal Party seat. The equivalent pathway for Labor tends to become a union rep in a blue-collar workplace. You work your way up the union movement, maybe become a staffer for an MP, maybe not, but eventually through the union movement and making enough money essentially for the Labor Party and bringing enough donations, you'll eventually get yourself your endorsement as a candidate for the Labor Party. And it just seems to me that the incentives now are for unions to focus on their own little kingdom building rather than focusing on what's actually best for their members.
100%. I think both of those scenarios that you explained are both pretty crook, and probably goes some length to explain, the current state that we have, the current state of the cattle running the show. So it's all pretty depressing. But
yeah. So tell me a little bit about, you're sort of saying you can save members sort of $200-300 each, whilst at the same time answering the phone faster and having the legal team there for them, and blah 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 blah. People could be forgiven for feeling like it's a little bit too good to be true. So what is it that's different about you guys, and particularly in relation to political parties, et cetera, that allows you to actually do a better job on less money?
So written in part of the condition of us servicing a new union, I think there's a group of pilots even that have come to meet with us this week that are interested in setting up an alternative pilots union. But one of the conditions of servicing that union and giving them a hand is that they must write into their constitutions the prohibition on giving any financial support to any political parties or any in-kind support, the likes of which would be, the phone canvassing centres, etc. So if that happens and they focus, and that allows us to focus purely on servicing the member, we can do that, save money, and even make a little bit of money, which is extraordinary to think. Half the price, and there's still some money left over. I mean, it's just the wicket that these unions have been on for so long, the rivers of gold. I mean, now you've seen, and again, this is pointing to one of our problems. I think the greatest problem facing our country, hence why our mission is to save Western civilization and to defend the individual. But one of the greatest problems we are facing in this country is that the union movement now controls, through the industry super funds, $2 trillion worth of capital, almost the entire country's capital. So if you've got BHP or CBA or any of these big companies now, like big ASX listed companies, wanting to do anything, to sneeze, they have to bend the knee to the unions. And it was interesting when superannuation was brought in, Bill Kelty, the ACTU secretary, and Paul Keating were talking, and they said that this will be the next great industrial weapon, better than striking. The ability for the unions to use their pension funds to invest or divest based on how they treated their workers. Now, we haven't seen any of that come to fruition, and instead it's been trying to cripple some of our great companies like BHP, etc., and making them bend the knee to this, woke ESG stuff, and like all these big corporates seem to be losing their mind, and all of it stems back to the union movements controlling these industry super funds, which then is now controlling the economy. I mean, they don't need government anymore. They're that powerful.
No, we talk a lot about BlackRock and some of these other Vanguard, et cetera, being these huge investment firms that have shareholdings in almost every ASX listed company, every American sort of listed company. Apologies everyone for my internet. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing this. We talk about the amount of power that brings to them, and you mentioned ESG. The BlackRock have been very, very proactive promoting the idea that all of their companies, all the companies that they own shares in, are going to have ESG, it's environmental, social, governance type policies, basically wokeness inside their companies, and then DEI, diversity, equity, inclusivity targets on their boards and in their C-suite and executives and these sorts of things. And really what BlackRock have actually done is use the power of the dollar to bully these companies into doing things that are not in the best interest of shareholders. This is the irony. And actually what we've seen recently, I'm not a big fan of regulators, but the regulators in the US have done one thing right recently, and that is they've kind of yanked on the chain a little bit of boards, warning them that they've taken their eye off maximizing returns for shareholders, which is the responsibility. That is the fiduciary responsibility of every single member of every board on every ASX listed or every stock market listed company. You must maximize value for shareholders. That's your job. And if you fail to do that, you can actually get sued by your own shareholders for failing to do that. So that's kind of put the brake on things just a little bit. But I reflect on that, and in Australia, the equivalent would have to be the $2 trillion in industry super funds that you mentioned, and the amount of power that gives to anonymous people. Who are they that are making these investment and divestment decisions in the background? It just seems like it's almost an alternative government at that point.
And to give an example of that, I was invited to a Hester lunch. Hester is the industry super fund for privately employed nurses. And they got up to talk about their investment strategy, which was based on the 6, 7, 8, whatever it is, United Nations human needs. And one of those was water. So their flagship water investment was the Sydney Water Corporation, which owns the desalination plant that they built, the White Elephant, Tim Flannery said there was never going to be another drop of rain in our dams. And it incensed me because, I mean, how does something like that provides no value or productivity or isn't even being used? I think it might have been turned on once. How does that help a nurse retire earlier? How does that help her grow her super balance?
Well, don't get me started on water policy, because that is literally how I started 15 years ago, was on the desalination plant that they built down in Victoria. And just for those that are curious, what they did was they built that plant. I can't comment on the Sydney one, although I do suspect it'll be very similar. In the case of the Melbourne one, they built it before it was even finished. The rains had come, the Mitchell River had flooded again. The dams weren't full, but they were filling. 2012 was a record year, the most rain in the Murray-Darling Basin area that had ever been recorded. And so they never turned the desalination plant on, but they paid to keep it on standby in kind of this semi-mothballed condition where it could be brought out in only a matter of weeks or maybe months, and the membranes put into the various filters and get this thing up and running so it could supply water. So Victorians were now, we'd spent, I believe it was $1.4 billion to build the desalination plant. The cost was that high, by the way, because it was constructed by union members. So there's this circular economy that starts to go on here. And we're seeing that in Victoria right now. We've just had revelations that there are people working on the metro tunnel that are on $300,000 a year as construction workers. Now, I'm all for people being well compensated. If you work a job that's particularly dangerous, if you're working underground, I don't have an issue with loadings to try and appeal to people, to attract them into work that would otherwise be less pleasant. But by the time you've got people in construction on $300,000 a year, you've got a problem at that point. And no wonder the state budget has been destroyed by all these infrastructure projects. But anyway, $1.4 billion to build a desalination plant. And then I believe it was in the tens of millions of dollars a year in upkeep costs, which the Victorian taxpayer was paying to not use the desalination plant, to keep it in this standby state. And written into the contract, there was something that if no water was ordered for X period of time, I believe it might have been 10 years, but I don't actually know for sure, then basically the contract was terminated and the government would no longer have to pay to keep it on standby. So what they did was they ordered a very small amount of water. The Victorian government deliberately ordered a very small amount of water to activate the contract so that they couldn't cancel it. They had to keep paying to keep this thing mothballed. And again, that was just done on taxpayers' dime to keep unions happy. And I'd be curious to know who owns that desalination plant. Is it owned by an industry super fund or substantially owned by an industry super fund? Was that in the back of the mind of the Labor Party when they decided to spend this money?
Well, it's only a rod if you're not in on it, Topher, obviously. But you touched on you touched on an interesting point, and it made me remember one of our keystone campaigns, and we're pretty passionate about sustainable pay increases. So we've done some analysis, which might interest you, across all states in the country. We've analysed the health systems, and in other Western countries, for every 10 nurses, there's one bureaucrat or administrator. The numbers are pretty much the same in Australia. Queensland's a little worse. New South Wales is a little better. But for every 2 nurses, there's one bureaucrat. So if we were both nurses here working, we would have one bureaucratic babysitter or administrator looking after us. And we've calculated the bureaucratic burden. If we were to shift that, and we believe in decentralizing the hospital system and the education system as an aside, back to the hospital boards. So boards make the decisions and nurses run hospitals as opposed to, behemoth government departments in town. If you can get back to that ratio of 10 to 1, which most efficient healthcare systems in the Western world can sustain, that would amount to a 47% increase that we could give every single nurse in the country, and all of the states would still save money.
Yeah, wow. So what I'm just doing the maths in my head and just kind of trying to look at that number in different ways and understand the implications of it. What you're saying is that here in Australia, to get from the ratio of bureaucrats to frontline nurses that we have down to the ratio that most other Western developed countries, we're not talking Africa, we're talking Europe, English-speaking countries as well as sort of Western non-English-speaking countries. You could fire 80% of all of the administrators. If it's currently 5 to 10, 5 administrators for every 10 frontline nurses, and the average elsewhere is 1 to 10, you could fire 80% of your administrators. And all that would do is get you down to the same ratio that most other advanced economies already have.
And to give you a specific example, so Kingaroy Hospital, Kingaroy is obviously, remote small country town in Queensland. It has 500 nurses. Kingaroy doesn't need 250 administrators in Kingaroy to run that hospital. It probably only needs 50. And again, if you can multiply that out times, however many hospitals we have, all of these, most of the reporting bureaucratic yokes that are around the necks of these, teachers and nurses are because you've got so many bureaucrats in a office somewhere in the city trying to justify their jobs. They need reports and paperwork to shuffle and analyze and look at endlessly. And then the frontline workers are burdened with this, stuff that really isn't helping them teach kids or nurse people. Yeah.
No, it is insane. And so many bureaucrats and administrators are just literally, they're just walking around looking for a way to justify their existence. We certainly see that with a lot of bureaucracies, federally and state. They're looking for a way to justify their existence. We see that with a lot of HR departments. No offense to anyone that works in HR, but honestly, crazy. They are walking around looking for problems to solve and looking for ways to justify. Now, as asked, a good question here, has asked how much do politicians get paid? Depends, state, federal, etc. But just for reference, I was just mentioning construction workers on $300K. A senator, I believe, is on about $220,000 or $240,000 a year, a federal senator. And they're that's meant to be a salary that's meant to attract our best and brightest. I know now with inflation having been what it is, there are, someone doing the same job that I used to do, 12, 13 years ago, when back then I was on about 80, 85 grand a year, which was very good money back then. Now they're on 150 grand for driving a forklift, just to give you some measure of just how quickly our dollar is losing value. Forklift drivers are on six figures, well into six figures. So it's kind of a problem. On the one hand, I'm outraged that they're paid $300,000 to work in construction. On the other hand, I also recognize inflation's a problem and our dollar is crap, and you can't get by on 60, 70 grand the way that, it used to be. If you were on 80 grand, you're doing really well. You're doing really well. Now it's not struggling, but it's not wealthy.
Well, I think most people, if you're on $80,000, if a household at $80,000, I think it would struggle to get by. I mean, it is expensive to live at the moment, and it's again, you've got these unions and they can't even diagnose the problem. I mean, inflation's terribly bad, and they try and point to the war in Ukraine or something, and that's caused all this inflation. Nothing to do with energy security, how they've just been absolutely destroying our grid and our coal-fired power stations, which have been delivering cheap, reliable, and a cheap cost of living as well. I mean, all of these things have been attacking and undermining, and now it's all sort of coming to a head all at once. Huge government spending. I mean, if you can't at least diagnose the problem, how can you take any steps to try and solve the problem? Yeah,
it's quite extraordinary. And just staying with energy for a moment, I saw a report relatively recently that showed that brown coal, the cost of generation for brown coal for every kilowatt hour that it dispatched into the transmission lines was 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, that, of course, is not the retail price, because the retail price has to then cover all of the distribution infrastructure as well. But it was far and away the cheapest of anything. And, people say, oh, well, wind power and solar power prices can go negative. That's even better. No, that's not even better. That's a sign of a very, very sick marketplace when people are literally going to be charged money for supplying into that marketplace. And the volatility that's been created there is just, is costing us all a fortune. Anyway,
I think Australians really need to take notice of what these politicians are doing, because it's going to seriously start to undermine our quality of living.
I think it has already. I don't think it's going to start to. I think it's happening. I mean, if you actually have a look at what are we now, 8 consecutive quarters of a decline in GDP per capita, I believe that's correct. So that, which is the longest streak in Australian history. You know, GDP doesn't matter; it's GDP per capita that matters, and in fact, even that I would say doesn't matter. GDP money is just a proxy for goods and services. It's what we exchange for the goods and services, and what matters is how much we get in goods and services, not actually how much money we're spending. And so, because actual inflation is very different to official inflation, the inflation-adjusted GDP does not actually reflect what's going on. So it's actually even worse than that. We've shown 8 quarters of decline in per capita GDP, but the decline is even sharper once you factor in the difference between official inflation and actual inflation, which I estimate to be somewhere in the order of 2.5 times is my best guess. If official inflation is 3% or 2.7%, they just came out and said, then real inflation, by my estimate, is going to be running somewhere around 6.5%, somewhere there, once you actually take a clear-eyed look at it. So we've got to.
It's a problem that these politicians have let this happen, because it's so hard to get pay increases for workers. It's a hard slog, and to try and get a 7% pay increase just to keep up with inflation, like, it's a lot of work. If they hadn't just bugged it up in the first place, I mean, we could be getting ahead as opposed to going backwards.
Yeah, and it's tragic. The number that I think matters, and going to get into the weeds a little bit here, but the number that I think matters, the number that is crippling our economy, is the difference between what you pay for something versus what that company actually receives from you. And to say a same kind of number a different way, the difference between what a worker costs their employer versus the spending power that the worker actually gets to spend later on. And the difference is enormous. And you'd know this well in your line of work. You know, if someone's on, let's just pick a figure, if someone's on $100,000, then obviously they then have to pay income tax out of that $100,000. They then have to include GST and all the stuff that they buy. And just those two alone, someone at $100,000, they've lost somewhere in the order of 1/3 of their income, right? But just between those two overall, assuming that they're claiming the tax-free threshold on that $100,000. But that's not the end of the story. So they're on, let's say, $66,000 out of the 100K salary. The problem is, on top of that 100K salary, the employer has now had to put, 12% superannuation, which the worker never sees. They don't get any benefit from that. In addition to that, the employer has had to pay work cover premiums, has had to pay payroll tax, has to fund a bunch of other compliance-related activities, all of which add to the cost of every single employee. So suddenly, that person who's receiving $66,000 in spending power after income tax and GST is costing their employer something in the order of $120,000 to $130,000. Now, here's where the killer kicks in. The employer has to set the prices for whatever goods and services they're producing. They have to set the price to recover the full amount, the $130,000 per employee. But the employee's getting the spending power of the $66,000, which is why prices and income just seem to be impossible. And what's happening is we're focusing on raising people's salaries, when what we actually need to do is reduce the gap between what people actually get to spend and what they cost their employer. Because for as long as that gap is there, raising one is only going to keep raising the other.
I think you've raised two very important issues. I mean, the whole idea of bracket creep, and someone, as you're saying, on $80,000 a year only a few years ago was on a pretty good wicket. I feel like most active workers would probably be on 6 figures now, and that's considered a high income earner, and they're getting taxed out the wazoo. I mean, governments haven't even tried to attempt to seriously address the bracket creep. And of course, the unions would want to keep on, and the Labor Party politicians want to keep on increasing the superannuation rate, because, again, it just keeps feeding back into their machine where they can influence the economy and control things and have fingers in different pies. And man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in, one of those places and see some of the deals that they do. I mean,
yeah. Well, bracket creep's a huge issue, and what it amounts to is a stealth tax increase. So the nominal amount of tax per bracket remains the same, but because everyone is getting pushed up into those higher brackets very, very quickly, the amount of, or the percentage of tax that people are actually paying is only going up. And there's a lot more to it as well. I believe that it's in the interests of governments to deliberately underreport inflation, because things like pensions and disability and old age pension and all these things are indexed to inflation, by which they mean the official figure. Whereas if they can inflate away their debt at a higher rate, 7-8%, when they're only increasing their costs by 2-3%, then in actual fact, the capital value of their debt against the tax receipts, because of things like bracket creep, actually moves in their favor. It completely screws the economy, but it's good for the books of the government. And in fact, the federal government's recent surplus that it managed to pull off, I think it was last financial year, was largely due to bracket creep in any case.
Screws the economy, but screws families. I mean, people are struggling to put food on the table. Yeah. Mortgages are going through the roof. I mean, there's very real impacts with real people with this stuff. I mean,
yeah, it's easy for someone like me to sort of talk about the economy. In my mind, the economy is people, and that's something that is sort of always there for me. But yes, it can sound very impersonal. You're only worried about money. You're only worried about the economy. Well, the economy is people. Money is people and people's lives. Let's talk about you a little bit more. Speaking of people, you're a person. Last time I checked, I'm reasonably sure that that's true. So what brought you to the point where you actually would look at a challenge like taking on the unions, the multi-trillion-dollar, industry super fund backed unions that have such a stranglehold in Australia? What makes you so crazy that you would actually look at that challenge and go, yeah, I'll take that on?
Well, I suppose it goes back to my, it was interesting, my university days. I mean, I was, thought I had my career figured out. And then for my sins in life, ended up getting involved with the student union. And I was sitting around during one of the student elections, and this guy came and sat next to me, and he said, "Can I tell you why I, started this student ticket?" And I said, "Oh, sure. Why would you stand around in the sun and do this? It seemed like a bit of a goose." But anyway, he said, my very first day of university, I was walking down the main street of outside Queensland Parliament here at QT, and I was with my Jewish friend, and we were walking past this big pro-Palestinian rally that was happening, and someone came up to them and said, "Oh, would you sign our petition, come join our rally?" She sort of naively said, "Oh, thank you anyway, my family's Jewish." The whole crowd turned on her, called her a Zionist pig. "You're the reason why all these Palestinian children are dying. Disgust me." Like she was accosted, broke down to tears. This guy, Jake, was pretty upset by that. Went to the went to the chancellery, knocked on the door. They said, the university said, "That's pretty bad. You should go chat to the student union." Went and found it, knocked on the door. The president came out, and it was the president who abused it in the first place. So he was pretty motivated to, try and do away with these people, which they eventually won. And then they started to uncover all sorts of crazy things. And this is the socialist alternative, and sometimes Labor left, different iterations of at the Guild. They uncovered that the presidents had novated leases for sports cars. They had an off-campus office. They had these special scholarships that no one knew about for textbook bursaries and helping to pay your bills. Only their friends knew about it and claimed them. What else happened? Oh, they wanted to ESG, an example. They the student union used to have $20 million in the bank. They wanted to invest ethically, so they got rid of all fossil fuels, got rid of guns, tobacco, all that sort of thing. But they wanted the same sort of returns. So they found this incredible investment vehicle called subprime mortgages that they invested all of their money in just prior to 2008, and almost overnight lost 50 cents in the dollar. Then after that, one saw all this nonsense, we were invited to go down to the National Union of Students, and we went down to the National Union of Students, and they wanted us to pay $80,000 or something to affiliate again. we were getting motions up on the Senate floor about bringing back voluntary student unionism and things. So we didn't need their help. But we went down there and they were debating motions like banning the Olympic Games because it promotes competition, and to increase the age of abortion to 2, so a mother had the right to abort their 2-year-old. So not only...
from a student union. This is a student union voting on that at their national convention.
The peak body of the student union. We obviously that was all cuckoo and had nothing to do with students. And it was at that point I thought, well, we're doing some cool stuff. We have a 24-hour phone hotline. Someone gets in trouble with academic plagiarism or needs extensions. I think, the 2 KPIs that I measured myself on, the amount of litres of beer poured at the university bar. We got the #1 most litres of beer poured at the university bar of any university bar in the country. And we got a Guinness World record. Hang on. We got a Guinness World record for the most people at a toga party, 8,000 people at River Stage. I think we nailed the KPI. But it made me think that there could be an alternative to the National Union of Students, and I set up an organisation called the Australian Students Association, which was more about empowering each of these student unions and helping them do cool things like toga parties and how do you get more people at the bar, build culture on campus, how do you do the academic advocacy way better than it's currently been doing. So I did that, and then eventually ran into and crossed paths with Graham, who had just basically started the nurses or helped start the nurses union.
Yeah. Which that was about sort of 10 years ago, you said, that Red Union started. It's not like a spring chicken that popped up overnight.
No, yes. I've got a lot of grey hairs from a lot of fights over many years, but we're still here. And, I think we've only been getting stronger and better in our service provision. And the better our service provision gets and the more we do to help people, I think that the unions are flat-footed and they won't be able to catch us.
So I've heard a lot of great stories about you guys over COVID, particularly from nurses, because they were one of the professions that was mandated, and that just seems to be, I've bumped into more of them. Just for those that sort of aren't aware, I mean, you guys had to bring on extra sort of caseworkers to support people. It got pretty crazy for you guys. Tell us the story.
Oh, yeah. It's not a fun story. We surveyed our members initially. We were called conspiracy theorists for surveying our members when there was talk of a vaccine coming out, saying should people lose their jobs if they don't get this, new vaccine that they're talking about. 75% of our members came back and said no, they shouldn't lose their job. So in fact, we have our own mandate from our members to do something.
To represent them. That's what a union's supposed to do.
Correct. So we said that, well, then the mandates hit. I mean, fast forward some time. We said it should have all come back down to consultation because they didn't consult in the workplace. And these are things that are in law, black letter law. People have human rights. There's all sorts of protections involved. And we went from answering about 300 phone calls in a week to 3,000 phone calls in a week. And just the phones were running hot. We could not answer. There were so many phone calls coming in. And it was, it started in Queensland because we were based in Queensland. We had people from Victoria crying out saying, well, why can't you help us? Why can't you help us, with all this correspondence to say, well, I demand consultation. I want to, be part of this to exercise their workplace rights. And we extended ourselves to Victoria because it was the Fair Work jurisdiction. And we thought, okay, well, we'll try, but we're extending ourselves. I mean, keep in mind, at the start of COVID, there was probably about, 8 of us in an office. And then in our zenith, we probably had 60 staff plus 20 volunteers. And I say that this is probably one of the most beautiful things I've witnessed in my life. And sometimes there's, beautiful things come in really dark times. We were getting phone calls of people who were not only worried about losing their jobs, losing their entire profession and never being able to practice again, losing their houses, seriously, moving, troubling stuff. And we had these 20 angels come in to volunteer, and because they couldn't get onto us through the phones, they wanted to come and answer the phones to help other people. And the volunteers kept pouring in. Wow. Through some volunteers because, they were just hearing the same emotionally charged stuff over and over that they were going through themselves, and they just couldn't handle it. And, God bless them. But so that all happened. We went from 7,000 members, I think, to 17,000 members over the course of like 2 or 3 months. Broke all of our systems. It was all pretty chaotic. But we had some very cool people from interstate who had been impacted by this come on board, want to put shoulder to the wheel. And it was at its core a grassroots movement. We're still obviously reeling from the aftershocks of that in various professions, totally short-staffed. A lot of these institutions, health systems, education systems are struggling. It had never been done before. A lot of it, like the industrial carnage that happened, had like the sheer amount of people that lost their jobs has never been witnessed before in this country. The amount of, I think we had filed something like 4,000 or 5,000 individual matters. I mean, that litigation program had never been undertaken by anybody ever in this country, possibly in the world. We had an incredibly devoted team. I think our team probably needed a union. I think there was, some of us worked 8 weeks without a weekend, and it was 12-hour days, and it was cabin fever, and it was just like bunker mentality. But, we tried so many different legal avenues, public service appeals, they got thrown out. General protections, dismissal claims. Well, they said dismissal is not a factor, which is, I think, bullshit. But anyway, don't get me started about what's wrong. I'll get myself in trouble. Then was general protection, non-dismissals. And then it was, so we're trying all these different things. Then human rights matters. We've withdrawn some of those now. And only because, and it's interesting, we're trying to get good quality barristers to overview some of this stuff. And in the last 3 years, they would not touch it, would not even talk to us, wouldn't take our money. It all became very busy all of a sudden. But now we've finally found someone who is a very highly respected KC. And I think that some of the heat has gone out of this, or the stigma, or whatever you want to say, out of the issue. And hopefully there can be some, clear minds actually look at some of this stuff. And I think there's talk of maybe turning some of those human rights things into a class action if it can happen. But obviously we're waiting to hear back to see what that KC says. But I mean, I remember everyone saying that this is going to be a, lawyers picnic, or it's going to go on, for many, many years. And I thought, no, I think we can probably, bring it to a head and get a win. How naive I was. But unfortunately, we almost went bankrupt during that period. I mean, goodness, trying to pay for the lawyers and it was a tough time.
Well, I tip my hat to you, because you really did intervene on behalf of so many people. And I've personally spoken to so many people that just have nothing but glowing reviews of the various sort of red unions and the work that you guys did, obviously the volunteers that came on board, the whole team. It's a phenomenal thing, and it makes such a difference in the lives of those people just to have someone pick up the phone. And I'll mention my own experience in this regard. But really what you guys did was exactly the same thing. When I spoke at the very first anti-lockdown protest, and I live streamed it, and that went viral, over 100,000 people had seen that within about a day or two. And with that came an enormous amount of, obviously, abuse, and people, you're trying to kill grandma and what have you. And then support, which was lovely. But then the third wave that came in, it started about 2 or 3 days later, was emails from people who needed help. Or no, that's not correct. Emails from people that wanted to be heard. At first, I thought they needed help, right? I thought they were writing to me because they wanted me to do something. And I'd sit there and go, well, I can't do anything because I'm not Red Union. I don't have legal teams. I don't, etc. I'm like, I'm a glorified forklift driver, who started to speak up on issues, and then people said, hey, keep speaking. We like what you do. And so I did. I kept doing it. But I was going broke as well. I had no money. I was locked down. My family was locked down. We were expecting our second child at the time. I had a 3-year-old kid losing his brain at home, locked in the house 23 hours a day. I was in the same boat as everybody else, and yet there are these people sending me these messages. And at first I was like, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't help you. I've got nothing. And then I realized they weren't messaging me because they thought I could help them. They were messaging me because they knew that no one could help their particular circumstances. And that was hard to take, to sort of realize, they know that they're messaging someone that can't help them. They're aware of that. And yet they're messaging me anyway because those particular people had nobody else. And so to know that Red Union were there for people in those professions, right? At least there was somebody else that those people could go to. You can't help everyone, and Red Union couldn't be there for every profession, and couldn't unfortunately get the wins that you guys, I know, wanted so hard to get and fought so hard to get in every single case. But you were there, and people could pick up the phone or send an email and, yeah, you guys got smashed. You guys, I've spoken to some of the people that worked in your call centers during that time, and you took on some of the cases during that time. And I think there's some trauma there in some cases. I mean, your team went through hell. I've no doubt you went through hell. That sense of responsibility that comes with that. But I just tip my hat to you, and I just say thank you. Please don't be dismayed by the people that you weren't able to help. Please just be proud of all the ways and all the people for whom you did make a difference. And I hope you're really proud.
I appreciate that. I think, it's all quite somber, but I think one of the the great feelings of hope that I get, being put through that, and everything that all of our systems being strained, we are a pretty dangerous, well-oiled machine now, and if anything like that happened again, I think we would be a very formidable force.
And just being willing to cop the abuse, the defamation, the conspiracy theory labels, these sorts of things. Very few organizations had the courage to do that. And yet you guys as an organization, you were willing to cop that. And again, just I tip my hat to you. So Kathy's just got a comment here saying, are people still in unions? I got no help. Well, this is kind of the idea with the Red Unions at the moment, mostly representing teachers and nurses, but also doctors and police officers and also general workers union, Kathy. So if you are in a line of work where you need to have a union, or you need to have professional indemnity insurance, or a line of work where you'd like to have a union, but you're sick of the union you've got, I'd really highly recommend. What's the URL, please?
Redunion.com.au, www.redunion.com.au. It has all of our unions listed there, and you can choose which state you're from, and it'll put you in touch with the correct union for you.
Yeah. So Kathy, you can, you're a nurse. That's fantastic. So the Red Union definitely have a union for you, depending on which state you're in. They've got all the states covered. And just use the code K100. If you're going to join up and have these guys represent you, use the code K100. You'll get $100 off your membership. And their membership is already cheaper than basically everybody else's. So yeah, just do that. And hopefully that'll help you out.
And one of the other things I think that's pretty important too is, I think Kara might have mentioned that in the video you played earlier, is just thinking about the values of the union, or the labour aligned unions, and I guess the values that we espouse. I mean, I guess we've got a little bit more of a conservative bent. I see ourselves as sort of almost picking up that old school DLP banner that was sort of picked up and run with by B.A. Santa Maria during the days when the movement was being threatened to be taken over by communists. And I think that fight was had and is over, and the union movement is now run by communists. They, unironically refer to each other as comrades. So I think there is place for normal, good, dare I say, God-fearing people that, don't bow to some sort of socialism god and of these ideologues, but they just care about, working class people and helping them get ahead in life and put food on the table and, and creating harmonious workplaces. Ultimately, I mean, we would like to see issues resolved. We had so many issues I could tell you about where the unions try and just keep ratcheting up the tension between the, the workers and the boss to try and, justify their existence. Whereas, most people want to go to work and just, get on with life and have a good time while they're at work. They spend quite a lot of their life at work. So whatever we can do to try and, make that a more pleasant experience, given that we've got an online learning platform now, so help, upskill them, etc.
Yeah. Look, thank you for everyone's comments here. We really appreciate some lovely things being said. I've already put a few on screen and another one here from Lisa. Thank you for that. It is very much appreciated. So what's the before I'll put the website back up on screen in a little while and re-mention the discount code for those that do. If you do want to switch and actually get a good union, you can do that. It's going to help me out. Red Union have been kind enough to give a code K100 that's going to save you even more money on your membership, and it also then leads to a little bit of support for me. So that's fantastic. But before we get there, what's kind of the future vision for Red? You've talked about values. You've talked about, you've only mentioned them briefly. I'd be very happy to hear more deeply. You guys really, and this is something that really came out when I was interviewing you guys for the video, you guys really, you see what you're doing in the context of the much bigger conflict that's going on, this sort of the civilizational conflict about our soul and our identity and who we are and our values. And really that then ultimately in turn is about the future. So how do you see the future? How do you see the future generally? How do you see the future of Red? And what are you doing as the director of the Red Union, the support hub, to try and build a better future?
I think just by us growing and existing and taking members away from these other unions, there will be tremendous good that flows throughout the country. The future, I think, unfortunately, Australia is in a position where we are downstream culturally from the US. We inherit seems to be all this crazy nonsense is, a few years, they're a few years ahead of us than we get it. The United Kingdom, I think, is quickly becoming a basket case.
Yep.
I see the potential for us to be at the forefront of trying to remedy some of those big issues they're facing. In the next 5 years, I see us getting to 170,000 members, and that being a tipping point in Australia and New Zealand in particular for the union movements. They're going to have to radically change, or we will become the hegemony. And then all of a sudden, I think that changes a lot of conversations around this misinformation crap. All of that stuff, I think, then becomes put on notice. But we have connections in the United States that we're talking to at the moment. We'd love to be in the United States because, again, I don't know if you've watched many videos on the teachers' unions over there, but they are out of control. And and a lot of the stuff, like we now have situations in Australia where teachers are, if a kid comes to them and says they want to change their genders and pronouns and that sort of thing, the teacher is prohibited from telling the parent. So this whole idea that, it's not the parents that raise the child, it's the state that raised the child, deeply troubling. All of this stuff is, ideological stuff that emanates from the American teachers unions. So there are sane teachers, there's quite a rump of them. We want to try and appeal to them with normal, conservative Western values. Come join us. And I think if you can make inroads in the United States, if you can make inroads in the United Kingdom, I think that will be quite a bulwark from some of the crap that we're seeing coming into Australia. So that's sort of our vision where we want to go. And then in terms of service provision, we've got plans to set up our own insurance company. As I said, the tax stuff, there's quite a lot I think we can do to further cement our service provision to our members, reduce our costs even further. And I suppose build a bit of a moat around us, because we're certainly under attack from governments and from the other unions. I think I've been sued for defamation 3 times simply for saying that a particular union supports political parties or that a particular union supports the Labor Party. I thought that was not contentious. I thought the union movement created the Labor Party, but obviously not so.
Well, it is amazing the way that lawfare is increasingly being used against us, and the potential for something like what you're doing with Red Union to really help to guard against that. You mentioned before that you've had pilots, striking up a conversation with you now, obviously not commenting on what will or won't come out of those conversations, but nevertheless, there's entire new industry sectors that are recognizing the value of what you're doing. And I have in the back of my mind concerns, obviously, around what the misinformation, disinformation bill could do to someone like myself as an independent political commentator. And one of the responses to that potentially is to actually try and package up my work into a format that is, at least in terms of legality, is indistinguishable from mainstream media. And that involves setting up an umbrella body, that involves having the right insurances and the right qualifications and all the right things in place, so that if they were to do something against someone like me, they would also be taking action against a whole host of other people that they really want to leave alone, they want to protect, because they are a part of that hegemony, that mainstream. And one of the thoughts would be, well, what about an alternative to the MEAA, the Media Entertainment Arts Alliance? Like, what about something like that? I mean, obviously, again, not prefacing what may or may not happen, but these are really important conversations. And until you guys came along, it genuinely had not really occurred to me that there could be alternatives to the MEAA. There could be alternatives to these militant, labor-aligned, industry super fund type unions. So you guys have kind of introduced, for me at least, an entirely new sort of paradigm. For anyone that's kind of heard this, and sorry, you go.
I was going to say, how ridiculous though that you're even contemplating all of these hoops to jump through, just to be able to, make commentary. I mean, the whole, and I think the party might have said, oh, this thing has got, so many problems. But I mean, the whole thing is based on an incorrect premise, which is that some government bureaucrat needs to decide what truth is. I mean, people who read something and digest media, they are the people who should decide what truth is.
And how often have we seen something be called misinformation and turn out to be true in just the last 4 years, let alone throughout history? I mean, honestly,
and this bill is particularly worrying for us because, I mean, there's every chance that it could be, one of the reasons we're deplatformed and we cease to be able to advertise to prospective members.
Yeah. If they just turned around and called it misinformation. And the unfortunate thing is that once these government bodies or bureaucrats or whoever is given this power call you misinformation, by default, the onus of proof ends up on you to prove them wrong. Which means that they can, and
you've got to convince the social media companies that risk facing 5% of their revenue and a fine,
global revenue,
that it's worth still dealing, with little old me. I mean, as if they're even going to pick up the phone.
Australia got mercilessly mocked, and we deserved it, for when our online safety, our e-safety commissioner, decided that she wanted to ban the hosting of a video of a stabbing in Sydney anywhere in the world. She wanted to regulate global internet access to a video of an incident that took place in Australia, which was, of course, the stabbing of Bishop Murray. And thankfully, he's recovered and continues to preach and do amazing work. But here's the Australian e-safety commissioner, who's actually an American, but anyway, presuming to regulate the internet globally. And we were mocked for that, and so we should be. But now we've got a piece of legislation where our government seems to think that it can do the same thing. Misinformation does not have to be hosted in Australia. It just has to have been accessible to people in Australia. And they're talking about 5% of global revenue as a fine. I mean, these are fines into the billions of dollars for what? For saying that maybe the coronavirus came from a lab? It's a new level of madness, and I didn't think I'd see that. The level of madness we were already at, I thought was pretty impressive. I didn't think we'd find a new one.
Oh, and it's interesting too. I was chatting some years ago with some friends of mine who've done quite well in the tech space, and they're saying, "Oh, Australia is generally the testing ground for a lot of tech companies to roll out updates and things because it's Western, relatively affluent, and it's just an isolated area, so they can test bugs." Sydney Safety Commissioner. I think she came from the US, didn't she? And she's come over here trying to do all this stuff, all this misinformation. Misinformation is being spoken about globally. We seem to be, one of the leaders in trying to run all this stuff. It just seems more and more that we seem to be the guinea pigs. And I think, I don't know, we've got to really get together and organise and push back against this. Otherwise, if we don't, it probably just gets rolled out everywhere else.
Yeah, 100%. So for those of you in Sydney, this Saturday, 11:30 at Speaker's Corner is a protest against the Misinformation Disinformation Bill. For those in Melbourne on Saturday, I think it's Saturday the 5th, is a protest at Flagstaff Gardens against the Misinformation Disinformation Bill. You've only got until Monday of this week to put in submissions regarding the Misinformation Disinformation Bill. Can I really encourage you to do that? And there are there are many different people that have created kind of letters that you can copy and paste and modify a little bit, just to make that easier for yourself. Just Google around, you'll find various people that have done that. This is a real battle stations moment. This Misinformation Disinformation Bill. This is one of the most serious pieces of legislation that I've seen in my time as a political commentator, 15 years now. And if we lose this one, it's very, very difficult to navigate from there.
Can I also give one more plug? Otherwise, I'll be in a lot of trouble with Cara. She's kicking off her the AMPS tour starting next week with Professor Angus Dalgleish and Dr. Paul Marrick. Both have been titans during the whole COVID pandemic sort of era, and they've got some really interesting things to say about how to, recover your health, etc., from some of the probably can't mention that's happened over the past couple of years, and exposing some of the corruption, etc. So I think if you're interested in your health and your family's health, whether you've been exposed to some of these things or not, I think you can learn a lot by attending.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I did actually have the screen ready to go and I forgot to mention it. So I'm very, very glad you did, because Cara is the loveliest and simultaneously most terrifying person on earth, and I do not want to be on her bad side. So I'm very glad you mentioned it. Definitely do get along. Unfortunately, none of those dates work for me. I've got other commitments already, which is unfortunate, because I've been to each of your previous tours. When AMPS brought Dr. Malhotra over from the UK, I was there for that. When you had your conference that included Dr. John Campbell, but honestly, as cool as it was to meet him, he wasn't there for his medical expertise. He's of course a doctor in education, but it was cool to have him there. But you had some phenomenal speakers and guests, and that actually produced a really amazing booklet published by AMPS. And so each of the tours that you've done so far have been absolutely outstanding, and I've had the privilege of being at both. Actually emceeing in both of them, which is lovely. But unfortunately, this one just doesn't gel for my dates. But guys, have a look at those dates, have a look at those locations, go to the Australian Medical Professionals website, and do please get along. You will not regret it. These are amazing people, and AMPS do a really, really lovely job with these events. And also, final note there, Daniel, thank you for mentioning, I wasn't sure if he had or not. I thought he had, but I didn't want to say it, that Joel Jamal has done an example letter that you can send as use as a basis for a submission to the inquiry, or to regarding this Misinformation Disinformation Bill. So please do get onto that. Well, mate, I think we've had a good chat. I'm not gonna string things out today, but what I do definitely want to do is jump back to the Red Union website and share that again. One sec, and get you to kind of talk us through, because do people need to ring you and contact you in order to become a member, or can people literally just do that on your website directly?
They can do if they want to test our phone answering, but otherwise you can just sign up directly through the website. It's a pretty simple form once you find which union's applicable to you. Bung in your credit card details, your bank details, and put in the code K100, which is Topher's code. And if you pay annually, or certainly off your first bill anyway, so you're better off paying annually, you can save $100. So instead of it being about $450, it'll be about $350.
Yeah, so there's your sign up form there. I've just clicked on the Nurses Professional Association of Victoria, just out of interest. You go in there, follow the process there. and you put in K100, and yes, I believe it has to be an annual membership, and you'll get $100 off. You're saving money anyway. The Red Union will save you money compared to the other unions that they're offering an alternative to. So you're saving money already to begin with. Plus, with K100, you're saving even more, and you're helping me out, and you're becoming a part of a movement. I mean, you guys have grown another 10% in just the last 2 months or something. You guys are still growing at an absolutely phenomenal rate. That 170,000 members you mentioned, if people get on board, that's potentially next year or the year after.
Yeah, and they keep trying to pass legislation to make it harder and harder for us to exist. Yet we keep growing faster and faster. So I think, particularly in Queensland anyway, this Labor government will end up with some egg on its face.
Well, it needs to. We, I'm tempted to say we can't survive another term of this Labor government, and the unfortunate reality is that the alternative proved to be pretty useless during COVID as well. I find it very hard to get excited about any of our major political parties, and that's a problem. That's a problem. They say that you get the government you deserve, and that does not say very nice things about the Australian people, unfortunately. Well, look, Jack, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. It's actually been quite low key, but I've really just enjoyed chatting with you. And as someone who, you went through the trenches. Your trenches were very different to mine, but you went through the trenches and you did what it took, and you stood tall when it mattered, and you were there for people when they needed you. And I just have such admiration for you, for your entire team. For what it's worth, just please pass on my thanks to everyone that was involved in that effort from you guys. I mean, I know it took a toll on everyone else, Cara and so forth, and all of your workers in the call center, all the people that were taking on the caseload and trying to represent workers through that time. It's taken a really, really, really significant toll on everyone. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart, and from so many of your members, including Rachel here, who's chimed back in. Integrity shines. Absolutely, it does, Rachel.
Well, thanks, Topher, and right back at you, mate. I mean, some of the stuff that you went through, and as I said, I've got many copies of Battleground Melbourne, and try and show that to anyone and everyone. So.
Yeah. Now, there was some mention, hang on, there we go. There was some mention a little while ago from you guys of kind of creating an associate membership or something for people that want to be supportive of the movement and really want to sort of throw their hat in the ring and help to swell your numbers, but don't necessarily, they might be retired, or they might be in between jobs. Someone's just said, I need an unemployed union from Susie. I'm sorry to hear about your situation, Susie. Claire is saying, can pensioners join just to be supportive? Has some thought been given? I don't know. I mean, maybe perhaps a union that's almost like a ratepayers union, so that just everybody who lives and pays rates has a body that we can go to when we have an issue with our local council, or an overzealous parking inspector, or local dog pound or something.
Well, it's interesting. There's a group of parents we're talking to in New Zealand at the moment, because they're not really happy with what's happening in schools. But if a parent, speaks up in a school, then it's their kid who ends up being punished for the sins of the parent. Yeah. So there is some talk about that happening, particularly possibly in Australia as well. And I think there's a group in Melbourne who are actively looking at that. But yeah, I think it's the way forward. I think sensible people, probably haven't looked to the collective previously, but I think there is. I love this guy in the UK. He's a Stanford professor, and he talks about the power of the and, where I think you can have individualism and collectivism at the same time, rather than the tyranny of the or. So try and look for wherever we can ands.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's an underappreciated thing in conservative and libertarian circles. And as a libertarian, I'll simply say there is nothing wrong with joining a collective, provided that it's voluntary. Provided that membership and the benefits of membership are a voluntary association, and provided that collective does not then use its collective power coercively, inappropriately coercively, then there's nothing wrong with a collective. There's nothing wrong with joining like-minded people who have a common goal or a common challenge, a common problem, and joining forces to try and overcome and to face those problems. Yeah, so Simone has chipped in again. I continued my contributions for 2 years, although I was not allowed to nurse, as I totally appreciated the support of the Red Union. I'm now back nursing and stand solidly with Red into the future. I mean, if you want an endorsement, if you're vacillating and you're not sure whether you want to join Red or not, I mean, there's not much of a stronger endorsement than someone to say, well, I was unemployed for 2 years and I kept on paying my dues to them anyway because I loved them so much. That's a pretty resounding endorsement right there. Thank you, Simone, for that. And Kettle Brock is saying you're doing the Lord's work, Jack, and I agree. Look, I can see you getting awkward and embarrassed because people are saying nice things about you, and you're just not quite sure what to do, how to respond. So I'm going to let you go. But look, it's been such a pleasure. Everyone who's thinking about joining, please just go to redunion.com.au. Have a look at the page, find the union that applies to your area and your profession. Make sure you sign up for 1 year and just use that code K100. Let's make sure that these guys keep growing. They're up to 22,000 last I heard, Jack, is the most recent update. Let's try and get you to 25 or 30,000 before the end of this calendar year, and then just hope that growth just keeps on going exponentially up and up and up.
Appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
All the best, James. Thank you for the comment. It has been a great chat and a pleasure as always. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Go to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com to get a hold of my merch, to buy my course, and to keep my wife happy. That would be very, very much appreciated. Everyone, have a good night, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Cheers.